So I'll start with a quick intro. I'm Wendy Gu. I'm a second year MBA student at Duke. And I'm super excited to introduce the star of our show tonight, David Frazee. David is a managing partner of Azimuth Opportunity Fund and a managing partner of Richmond Global Ventures, a leading international venture capital fund. Of RGV's 10 investments, 4 have already achieved unicorn status and are pioneers in their field. Previously, David was one of the top global VC and innovation lawyers, a successful entrepreneur where he helped scale a startup into a unicorn, and advisor to dozens of governments on innovation policy. David works extensively with Endeavor Global as a global mentor and was a founding board member and architect of Endeavor Catalyst, a pioneering venture philanthropy fund. David, what inspired your journey into venture capital?
Well, first of all, Wendy, thank you for hosting this. I really appreciate that. I have been obsessed since I was a child growing up under the poverty level with the question of how do you create opportunity globally? Because talent is distributed, opportunity is not. And I think about what I had to do, and I have one of my life mottos is be the person you needed to save you when no one was there, so that no one else has to suffer the way you did. And what I've learned in my life is innovative entrepreneurship is the greatest tool of equality and opportunity that exists in the world as a practical matter. I mean, I can't change governments, I can't change wealth patterns, I can't change I can't change any of that. But if I can find the 1 out of 200, 1 out of 300 kids who have the capacity to dream, imagine, and create their vision in the world, you can transform the world. So going to Richmond Global, I asked the question, if you have a unit of time and money to decrease poverty, increase the middle class, create political stability, and change regional economies, what would you do? And of course, the first answer is educate girls and women by a long shot. But the second thing you would do is create innovative entrepreneurship. And you need funding to do that. So the thesis of Richmond Global is we invest in globally transformative opportunities, and half our deals come in emerging markets specifically. So places like Mexico and Argentina, Indonesia. So that's the thesis of what Richmond Global is. And I have been working globally my whole career when I was still a lawyer in captivity. And I thought, why not actually be able to participate in the wealth that I create and take it on the road, as we say, and create those opportunities for people.
Well, it's amazing that you've been able to have such a huge social impact all around the world. Tell me about your new fund, Azimuth Opportunity.
Yeah, so Azimuth is I don't want to say a temporary thesis, but it's solving a bottleneck that we have in the venture capital world. So Richmond Global is a Series A fund. Like we do first checks typically, like large checks with conviction, like $5 million. And there's a bunch of us that do that. It's hard lately because you mentioned in the intro that we have 4 unicorns out of 10 deals. That's 40%. We should be heroes, right? Well, maybe we are, but I also have limited partner investors who have pitchforks and torches because they're like, where are our exits? What used to be a 7 to 10 year horizon from first investment to going public can now be 15, 16, or 17 years. Like we have an investment in a data analytics national security company. It's like in year 17. And we have multiple deals over a decade. And by the way, venture funds are only 10 years long. So we have a backlog of IPOs at the SEC. We have longer roads to get to exit. And the reason why exit matters is I have to give my money back to my investors. And by the way, we get paid on the profits, and we don't do that until we liquidate a company, right? So we're all frozen, and it's not just us. We have all the early stage funds are stuck in deals that are incredible, the best ones, but we can't get our money out. So Azimuth, getting back to your question, is can we provide partial liquidity for people that need to take some money off the table now? So the companies are great, but the opportunity comes from the Series A, the Series Seed, and sometimes the founders who have been in these deals for over a decade and maybe need to take 20%, 25% off. So we can get these deals at like half off. And the early investors may not get an 80x on that little bit, but they get 40 times their money, which is plenty good. And they can return some partial liquidity, pay some of the expenses. It's uncomfortable if you're a fund manager paying like all the fund expenses, like the accounting and the audits every year. You'd like that paid for out of some of the proceeds. So Azimuth takes advantage of that opportunity by trying to restore some liquidity to the early stage economy.
I see. That sounds like a really unique opportunity. in your experience, what separates the best early stage investors from the rest?
Yeah, so I'm glad you qualified that with early stage. So, I again want to emphasize, I'm looking at this from the beginning. So it's like three people around a table coming up with ideas. I mean, so this is not like a $30 million round on a $1 billion company. I mean, we're looking at the very beginning. My friend Tim Connors, by the way, I think Tim Connors is the best VC alive today. You've probably never heard of him, which is by design because he keeps a low profile. He's at Pivot North. But a number of years ago, we were talking about where the unicorns come from. And at the time, 80% of all unicorns in the United States came from about 15 or 20 Series A and Series C venture funds. His being one of them. And I like to think of us as one of the club. But, whether we are or not doesn't matter to the story. And I became obsessed with the question, what is it that these 20 funds are doing that other people are not doing? Because it's the same people year after year, decade after decade. It's the same folks. And when I dug into it, it turned out it's nothing like what you see on TV. And by the way, for those watching HBO's show Silicon Valley, that's a comedy, not a documentary. And, and even Walter Isaacson, novels and Aaron Sorkin movies, those are for drama. But what people were really doing was a subset of tools related around a few core things: lean methodology, human-centered design or design thinking, if you prefer that term, agile software development methods, growth hacking, and underlying all of these was a focus on exponential growth and on data analytics. And of course, there are things like business models, IP strategies, there's other things that matter. But if you parse through what everyone was actually in reality doing, we were all and still are obsessed with these fundamentals. Think of it as music, like this is the basic scale. Now, knowing how a scale works doesn't mean you can write Beethoven's Ninth, but you're sure not going to write Beethoven's Ninth if you don't know what a musical scale is. And so these are the actual fundamentals that drive all the top funds.
Cool. Thank you for sharing that. You mentioned lean. How do lean startup principles influence your investment decisions, especially in early stage ventures?
Yeah, well, let me define what lean is, because I think there's a popular misconception that lean is about just not spending much money. And ideally, that's also true, because we do need to preserve money at the early stage. Lean is actually, it's just scientific method. We identify as part of startup methodology, what are the core assumptions that must be true for this business to work? It could be a product, it could be a service, whatever it is. So typically they revolve around what causes growth. So what's the exponential viral growth or the paid growth model or whatever the model is? How do we test that? And how do we know people love it? Are they using it? Are they engaged with it? Are they, So we want to test growth and value as our most important things. And there are other things to test first, but you want to test the things that are most existential and the things that can be tested fast. Because I can't test 5-year retention, but I can test whether 10 people will use it and tell their friends. I mean, that you can find out. So we build what are called minimum viable products or minimum viable experiments. I kind of like slightly better because it gives the better sense of it, where we do the minimum necessary to test whatever our core assumptions are. And that gives us an opportunity to build something, to measure it, and to learn from it. And if necessary, pivot. Because one of the greatest things that all successful startups do is they pivot. You don't go straight into the iceberg. If you're the Titanic, you ideally should go to the left or the right. And pivoting allows you to do that. Every successful company has pivoted. We laud perseverance in our culture, but perseverance to go into the iceberg is dumb and a waste of money. So we want to have pivot or persevere decisions. We want data. So the reason I said scientific method is, think about what I said. We have a hypothesis, like what's our value, what's our growth. We build a test and we get data. That sounds a lot like science to me. It's just the application of the scientific method to startups. It's not that radical, yet nobody does it. Everyone says they do. But if you really dig under the hood of startups, like if you ask them the question, are you successful? They'll all say yes. I've never had a startup in 30 years say, actually, we suck. And I don't know how we get up in the morning and look at ourselves. Some should say that, but they don't. But then I ask them, how do you know you're successful? What data do you measure? And if they give you anything, it's vanity metrics. Like, we have 30,000 new subscribers. Oh, okay, well, did you pay 3 times what they're worth or half of them canceling? Does that mean anything? What is the actual value proposition we need to create to create outsized exponential venture value for ourselves and our investors. We want to measure that and be scientific about it.
I love that. As a scientist, that really resonates with me. You mentioned design thinking as well. Why do design thinking principles matter so much?
Yeah, so my friend David Kelly, by the way, David Kelly, who invented design thinking, is a family friend because our girls went to school together. Ironically, we have never once discussed business. We just talk about the girls. We have a kind of unspoken rule, like we don't talk shop. And I kind of regret that now. But David Kelly has this quote or a question where he says, would you rather build something that is deeply felt viscerally by your customers or a cool product in search of an audience? And most people do the latter. We're all the smartest kid in class. We know better. We have a cool technology, especially if it's deep tech, because it's tech. And so we build this product, and then we think we have a marketing problem, which is we got to go find marketing people to sell it, and nobody wants it. So it's the marketing people's fault. Instead, you should be starting with the customer, the user. And customer gets complicated, by the way, so I'll put that aside for a second. But you want to build something that people feel the need for, that they have to have. We have something called product market fit, which maybe should be market product fit. Like you start with the market, not your product. I mean, we kind of have it backwards. But it takes away the hubris that we are the great inventors who know everything. Instead, we love a problem. We don't love our solutions. And we have to have a beginner's mind. Like we have to strip away all of our knowledge, which is hard because, again, we're experts. We know this field, but we have to listen deeply to what people resonate with, what they will pay for, how their problems are being solved now, and build something that has actual real utility. If you actually build something people want, it's hard to screw up too badly. So design thinking is really about how do you center the customer in this journey, and the customer's journey in this process of creation. And that's really the greatest thing it does.
That makes so much sense. Thank you for sharing that. Can you share an example where Agile execution by a founder made a decisive difference in a startup's trajectory?
Yeah, let me explain. Agile is wonderful. I'm going to give you a negative example of where they didn't do it, which I hope answers the question, but let me explain Agile for a second. So Agile is kind of like the love child of lean and design, which is we're going to work with a customer in a scientific way. So and Agile is very complicated, but in a very simplistic way. And by the way, if there are software programmers here, please don't throw things at the screen. I know I'm being simplistic. Is we always work around a customer. So ideally more than one. And we build meaningful things in what are called sprints typically, which is like a 1 to 2 week building cycle. So the old way was we design this whole big thing, build it, and at the end we go back and test it and then send it back. It was very inefficient. Agile is about working with the customer to create a continuous flow of how we're going to build small incremental things in defined ways. And we can change or be agile on the way by mixing it up, adding new features, taking things away, and there's continuous feedback. So we're not waiting till the entire thing is built. We're not building like an entire inflexible, rigid thing and hoping it works. We're going to test as we go along. So working with customers matters. The negative example I was going to give, and I don't want to mention the startup's name, but the startup blew through $3 million because the CEO pretended to have a customer ready. Which, by the way, was made up. It was complete fraud. And by the way, lying to your investors is called securities fraud. Please, as an entrepreneur, never do that. It's actually a felony. I know you're taught to just puff things up. Don't ever do that. Be completely honest with your investors. In any event, he said he had the customer, so they built this entire elaborate set of software, and there was no customer. And when it was actually shown to customers, like, well, that's not what we want. We'd rather have this and this and this. And can it do this feature? Can the interface look like this? This is the workflow that we really need to interact with our back office system. Now, if you design it through Agile in the beginning, you would have known all that from the very first turn, instead of spending multiple years and millions of dollars to achieve failure. You achieved because you built what you meant, but you achieved failure because no one wants it and it doesn't even work for its use case.
Crazy story, and yeah, it really does.
It happens all the time. You think. By the way, everything I've said should be obvious, and it is obvious, but no one does it. Like this is the kind of stuff. It's like the great novels, like when everyone pretends they read War and Peace, but really no one has. Everyone says they're lean and does Agile, but actually most people don't, and that's actually one of the disheartening things to me.
Growth hacking is often seen as a startup tool. How do VCs use it to accelerate portfolio success?
Well, let me answer that by talking about what growth hacking is. So, there's kind of two senses of what growth hacking means to people. So one sense colloquially is, we're going to be nimble and use like pop-ups and social media and free advertising because we can't afford large marketing budgets. And by the way, when I hear marketing, all I hear is the sound of a toilet flushing with my money. And I'm like, whoa, stop. Because, we think of marketing like these movie launches. So it's billboards and talk shows and press attention. And that doesn't work. Or if it works, it's very haphazard and random and hard to measure. Growth hacking on a more precise definitional level is we build the engine of growth into the product itself and we test it constantly. So you're not just testing, will people use it? Will people pay for it? Will they refer people? Is the engine of growth built into the product? And do we know that? And so, there's easy ones where the use of a social network, like any network effect play, contaminates other people. One node leads to other nodes. I invite 10 of my friends, otherwise it doesn't work, like chat features or something, right? But there's more subtle ways you can do it. So growth hacking in a more formal way is we build the engine of growth. And there's some interesting consequences of it. One is we understand the customer journey all the way through. So it's not just, because the way we think of sales typically is like they're hunter-gatherers. They kill the customer, bring them in, and they go on to the next one. They don't care. But the customer experience is after they've signed up, when they tell other people. It's also after they cancel. So we care about the entire journey. Why did people get rid of the service? One of the things I ask as a board member is, tell me all the contracts we lost. Tell me every customer who canceled. Can I call them? And they actually will tell you why they did. And that's very valuable information. The other thing, and perhaps the more important consequence of growth hacking, is everyone is on the growth team. There's no more engineers build it, salespeople sell it, and they hate each other. Everyone's responsible for growth. It's in the product design as growth, and in the marketing distribution as growth. And so it's interactive and dynamic. We're all on the same team. We don't have classes of shares for engineering, a different class of shares for sales. Like, we all get the same common stock. So we need to think as a team and unify perspective. So, I could spend an entire day on growth hacking, and often do teach entire days, but it's building the engine into it itself. And so we look for that. We look for that exponential sort of nuclear chain reaction inside of a company's model.
Amazing. Is there any secret to how you conduct diligence on companies?
How to do diligence? I'll tell you from my side and from what I'd like companies to know. So mostly the way diligence works is, here's a bunch of documents in a data room. We're going to have some junior associate at the law firm look through them for whatever. And maybe they do it, maybe they don't. Or if they do, they don't know what they're looking for because they're like first years and they're just too inexperienced. And that's an enormous missed opportunity. Diligence to me, and what we do in our funds, is it is a chance to create a systematic roadmap of opportunities and threats and potentials for growth. So if you look at one of our diligence memos, they can be like 15 pages, single space, 10-point type. And they say things like, okay, we have weaknesses in the Middle East, North Africa region for sales and distribution. Here's our strategy. Or we need to build a patent portfolio strategically that covers all the applications and services and designer rounds of this key intellectual insight that we have and that we could have monopoly rights for, because patents, by the way, are a legal monopoly. And so here's our systematic strategy to identify and block all of our core intellectual property. Or here's what we need to do to be more capital efficient. So we're going to analyze our supply chain, we're going to analyze bills of materials, and we're going to use more, say, lease lines as opposed to equity money for some of the capital, or whatever it is. All these have appeared in memos in our fund in the past. But it's a chance to be honest and direct with your investor and have them help you say, this is the strategy we will implement. And by the way, we've walked away from company deals after the diligence memo, but before we invested, because we handed over and the CEO and the rest of the board says, I'm not interested in that. Like, there's actually a unicorn we walked away from, which might sound like a bad story, but we also have a no jerk rule, which, but he said, we're not going to do any of this. We don't need to. We have so much money. People want to invest. We can basically waste money. And even if he's right, we don't invest in entrepreneurs who think our money should go into a pile in the middle of the street with kerosene and a bonfire. So it's also a way to smoke people out and get people aligned. This is the vision. Do you all agree? And from the entrepreneur standpoint, the big thing I would say about diligence is don't lie and don't hide. On our diligence list, and we're the only fund I've ever seen that does this, is we say for everything you would have to disclose to us at the time of sale of securities on what's called a schedule of exceptions. You don't need to know what that is, but before you invest, you have to say everything that's unusual about your company. We want to know that day one. Give that to us day one. If you have lawsuits, you have sexual harassment claims, you have tariff issues, tell us today, because we've seen this. We want to help you. We're problem solvers. I mean, there's nothing you're going to do we haven't seen before, probably. And please don't try hard to give us new stuff, because the stuff we've seen is already bad enough. But diligence is this great chance to have a unified plan of going forward and to see the strategic value an investor can give you. Truly is.
That's amazing. I love your comprehensive approach to doing diligence. Related to that, are there any mental models or decision frameworks you rely on to evaluate founders or markets?
Let me take those. They're two separate questions. So on the founder side, I truly look for people who have a scientific approach and have beginner's minds. You're probably too young for the comedian George Carlin. You've probably heard of déjà vu. I've been in this room before. George Carlin talks about, I have déjà vu. I've never been here before. You need to cultivate déjà vu. I've never seen this before. You're going to encounter as a founder so many new and different things. The things you thought were easy will be so hard. The things you thought were hard will be easy. And there will be 100 things you never even dreamed of. So, we talk about perseverance and grit and all these things. And obviously you need to have that or you can't survive. But you need to have a scientist's brain. One of my favorite CEOs is this guy, Adal, who is CEO of what is the hottest private fintech in the world, at least in Latin America. And if I ever mouth off to him and say, hey, Adal, we should do this, and by the way, this company's worth $2 billion now. We got in at the Series A at a 20 million value. I say, we should try this. What he will always say to me is, David, that's an interesting experiment. Propose your experiment in data and we'll try it. He's a data scientist. He's like, you may be right. I don't care if you're right or wrong. I just want to know what the data says. And so even the janitor could propose an experiment, and if it makes sense, they'll run it. So people driven by data, because most organizations are political. What I mean by political is not like, did you vote for Trump or Harris? I mean, you and I say, hey, look, let's support each other and convince the CEO because you go golfing with her. That's politics. And so the best ideas don't win. You should decide on the customers. Data wins. So what does winning look like in designing an experiment to see who's right? And failure has to be accepted or people won't do that. So we look for beginner's mind in data. We also, we want people that are open to ideas, just being the best. So, we want the smartest people. I used to work for this guy, Peter Olson, when I had the startup you mentioned, we grew to a unicorn in the telecom space. My first CEO built Octel Communications and sold it for $2 billion to Lucent. And he had two rules of life for startups. The second one was SFPs, the smartest freaking people. It's not the word he used, but he was like a sailor with Tourette's. But you just surround yourself with the smartest people and give them authority and delegate them, because you don't need to tell smart people what to do after they know you don't need to tell them how to do it. They'll figure it out. In terms of markets, we look for exponential markets and opportunities. If you look at every exponential curve you've seen, whether it's investing in the stock market, logarithmic functions, Internet of Things, chip speeds, doesn't matter. They start slow and you're like, this is dumb. Why did we do this? We should have stayed in business school. And then they have this inflection point and they take off like wildfire, and almost all the growth happens at the very end. That's the nature of exponents. We think linearly. And so we want opportunities in markets as well as mechanisms to adjust opportunities that are themselves exponential. Because even if you're average, you're going to have growth that looks like that. And if you think exponentially or look for exponential trends, you look like a genius. In retrospect, it's like dark magic. How did you possibly know? All the answer is, I looked for exponential trends and I harvested them. So we don't want to be the last investor in the horse and buggy manufacturing business when the car just came out. That's not where you want to be.
That's very interesting. What are some common red flags in founders?
Oh gosh, we don't have that much time, do we? I actually teach an entire class called Red Flags. I teach another one called How Not to Raise Money. There's so many. I think the common denominator comes around a few things. Like one is just arrogance. We laud culturally arrogance and toxic masculinity in leadership. I mean, we make movies about it because, look, if you want a good drama, you don't want the CEO who's functional, who asks her employees, hey, how are you doing today? How's your kid? Is your mom okay after chemo? Do you take the day off? Like, that doesn't make good drama. Highly functional adult people who communicate and are attuned listeners, which are actually the best leaders, we don't talk about them. We look at the people who are jerks and are these outliers. But there's also survivor bias, because there's 999 of those people whose companies died because they drove all their talent away, or they drove them in, so we want people, we don't want arrogance, we don't want toxic leadership, we want functional adult humans. And by the way, in our portfolio, we have 0 CEOs under the age of 40. Like, these are adults doing real problems that are multi-billion-dollar issues that, require real people. So we don't want any of that. And there's also, I guess, there's another strain of red flag, which is it their company or is it everybody's company? And here's what I mean by that. So once you take someone else's money, it's no longer your company. You have to act as a fiduciary in the best interest of all stakeholders, not just stockholders, but stakeholders like debtors and everyone else. And so if you understand that, the question is, would you step down to a chief evangelist role if we have to bring in a new CEO? The only answer is, of course I would. But people who don't understand that do lots of things. So they bring companies down, they divide companies. They also tend to steal. I mean, by the way, you always hear these cocktail party stories from founders. Oh, those bastard VCs want to come in and fire you. Like, no, we don't. No VC would ever want to fire a founder. It's drama. It destroys companies. We have to come in and be interim CEOs. We hate that. We want to be lazy. We just want to show up and let the company operate itself. What generally happens is, to be founder, you have to engage in one of two things, usually in combination. One is sexual harassment and two is stealing or embezzling. And you never hear that from them. We don't tell you, because we sign confidentiality agreements, that we won't talk about it. And we don't go to cocktail parties mouthing off about this kind of stuff. But that comes from either financial desperation or belief that I am above everybody because it's my baby and I can do what I want. And that's not true. Once you take other people's time or money, and there's other equity owners, it belongs to all of us collectively, and we have a duty to each other. So we look for those things, because those attitudinal things are early predictors of cancer to the organization, almost always. That's why I said we have a no jerk rule. Like, we've walked away from at least 2 companies that are now unicorns because we're like, we can't work with this person. We just can't work with this person.
Well, that makes total sense, and I'm really glad that you have the no jerk rule. As we're coming up on time, I have one last question for you. For aspiring investors and founders tuning in, what's one piece of advice you wish you had received early on?
Oh my gosh. Well, the real answer is the second one, but what I want to say is, learn how to do this. Like, entrepreneurship is the only thing in life where you think you're just born knowing how to do it. Well, she's an entrepreneur. He's an entrepreneur. Like, we don't think that about basketball or calculus. You weren't born knowing calculus or how to dribble or pass. Like, you spend 10,000 hours learning the basics. No one teaches entrepreneurship. So we should all learn it systematically with all these scientific principles, like beginning to end, and no one does. So that'd be the policy advice. But I guess the advice, the way you meant the question is, what did I not know? John Paul Sartre had this quote that hell is others. Hell is other investors. And what I mean by that is, I thought the entrepreneurs would be the ones that would drive me to consider addictions. I don't drink or smoke, but I want to sometimes. It's the other investors who do, because we're not aligned most of the time. And so, if I had to do one thing differently, like the deals that have gone sideways, I would have spent more time making sure that our strategic values and our way we would operate and how we would be hands-on was aligned with the other investors. Because when push came to shove, they were off to their next deal, missing an action, absentee, or taking the laziest option. And we're the ones left holding the bag, because we're operationalists at heart. Like, we go to war for companies in the trenches. And so from a founder perspective, make sure your investors are wartime investors. Like, they will be in the foxhole with you fighting, and that you're aligned on values. Because when you're not aligned on values, I can't tell you what the decisions will be that you will face, but you won't be making the same decision if your values don't align.
Thank you for sharing that. can't think of better words of wisdom to close on. And thank you so much for your time today and sharing your insights, David.
Oh, thank you so much. It was my pleasure.